Trunk or treat, come on. What an amazing time. And First Norfolk, you did so well helping us serve our community and our neighbors in the 7 cities. Over 50 trunks we amassed. I think it is the largest trunk or treat we've ever had as a church. And so you have done a tremendous job. Thank you all for serving so faithfully and helping us engage the community, our neighbors, and introducing them not only to our church, but the beginning stages of introducing them to Jesus Christ. And so we're thankful for that, and I'm thankful for you. A lot of things are happening in our church. I don't know if you know this, but right now, down the ramp in our chapel, we have our Spanish-speaking gathering going on. And we've had this Spanish-speaking gathering happening for more than 20 years as a church. It's been a wonderful partnership. The pastor of our Spanish, because I don't speak Spanish, but the pastor of our Spanish-speaking congregation is Vernig Suarez. And last week, Iglesia Bautista, this is the name, Iglesia Bautista del Camino, they had a special day and had close to 150 people who gathered with them on that special day, and had 9 people come to faith in Jesus Christ last week. Well, it's great. It's spectacular. Again, I don't know if you realize what's happening because you're in this hour. In 2 weeks, we're starting another worship gathering. We're moving our 5 o'clock to 12 o'clock, and that's going to be happening on this wonderful day called Time Change Sunday. And it's going to be a great day where we make room at this hour. And see, people say, well, I'm looking around. There's room in this room. Well, yeah, from what you see, but here's what you don't see. What you don't see are all the life groups that are happening and how the parking gets squishy, packed. And so we have to make room, and we've always had to do this. We're thankful for the growth that we're experiencing right now, that we have to move in the early hours. So we're going to have 9, 10:30, and noon. Encourage you to consider how that you can be part of that journey of helping clear up some space, especially for guests. We know, and if you don't know, we know that the majority of guests that gather with us gather at the 10:30 hour. And many of you are guests, and I've met several of you. And so we're thankful for you. We want to give you more room to where you're not having to, have road rage with one of our members. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. I know that you wouldn't have road rage with one of our members. One of our members may have road rage with you. No, that's not true. No. But we want to clear up the space so that you can accommodate that. So that's happening at noon. And again, we're just thankful for all that God is doing in our church right now. I don't know if you know this, but we've baptized people every Sunday in the month of October. Every single Sunday, we baptize someone who's made their faith public. Had a conversation at Trunk or Treat with one of the couples that have been visiting with us and gathering with us, and he said, I've accepted Christ, but I need to be baptized. So we're going to set that up. We've got people to baptize after this, after I finish talking, and at the close of this service, we'll celebrate the new life that God brings through faith in Christ through baptism. There's just a lot of things happening, a lot of wonderful things happening. Ladies, I want you to know, and can I just share with you, I don't know if everybody knows this. Some of you guess you don't know this. You hear me talk about, I have 3 grandchildren. I have a granddaughter. Her name is Nora. I have another granddaughter. Her name is Lucy. And I have a grandson. His name is Harvey. And you hear me talk about that. Some of you gathering with us, maybe you don't realize, but I have 4 daughters. I have 4 daughters. I have a daughter named Emily Catherine. I have a daughter named Elizabeth. I have a daughter named Maggie. And I have a daughter named Mallory. And on November the 22nd, they're going to be joining my wife at Girls Night Out. And ladies, y'all going to come, and they're going to share, and it's going to be a wonderful time. Out on the field doesn't cost anything, but we need for you to register. Girls Night Out is happening, so you be sure and be signed up for that. Now, men, you're not invited. Don't even pretend you're not invited. But ladies, we want you there. And so it's going to be a great day, and I'm thankful that it's going to be a day of celebration. We also have, the week before, November 15th through 17th, we have Disciple Now. Disciple Now is happening for our students. Come on! Disciple Now is happening for our students. It's going to be a great weekend for our students that weekend. So, man, what just tremendous things happening. And then after Thanksgiving, we're going to be right in Christmas at first. We have Christmas celebration. We have hometown Christmas, Christmas Eve services. We're on that movement where there will be a lot of opportunities for us to engage our communities and invite people to church. So just encourage you to be in prayer about all of those wonderful opportunities and activities. Ladies, you register for Girls' Night Out so that they know how to prepare for you, and it's going to be a great time. If you have Bibles, turn to Mark chapter 12. We're going to be spending the next 2 weeks in Mark chapter 12. Today, we're going to be looking at the beginning of stewardship. In Mark chapter 12, while you're turning there, Mark chapter 12, Jesus is making his way to the cross where he would die for sinners like you and me and be raised from the dead, so that when we place our faith in Jesus, repent our sin, place our trust in Jesus, God brings us into his family in that wondrous act of grace. And Jesus is making his way to the cross. But while he's making his way to the cross, he's teaching us, or teaching his followers, what it means to live in sync with the will of God, and how that they can continue not only to love God, but also love others and live the mission. Well, he's demonstrating that, and a religious leader, a scribe, comes up to Jesus, and he wants Jesus to kind of simplify. Have you ever wanted this to happen? Don't give me the whole load of hay, just summarize it for me. And that's what the lawyer wanted. He came up and he said, Jesus, what is the greatest of all commandments? Now, when he asked in verse 28, Mark 12:28, what is the greatest of all commandments? He's talking about what is the most important of all commandments, the most essential of all commandments. What is the commandment that encompasses all the commandments? I want you to summarize it for me. And so Jesus responded in our text today. Jesus responded, Mark chapter 12, beginning of verse 28 and 29. He said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Therefore you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second commandment like unto it is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, all of the law and prophets are summed up in this. So Jesus gives us in this little section what it means to live in sync with the will of God. It's important for us. If you have been brought into God's family through faith in Christ, you're a son or a daughter of God, you want to know, what does God expect of me? How do I live in such a way that I meet the expectations of a holy God? What is it that he expects of me as his son or as his daughter? If you're not yet a follower of Christ, this is still good information for you to know. That God, the creator of the universe, the one who made you in his own image and likeness, he expects you to love him more than anything else and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So, great information. As we look at this passage, the Great Commandment, it's called the Great Commandment. The Great Commandment is about the whole of our lives. Okay? It's not just about money, but it's not less than about money. Now, what I mean by that is, as we listen to the Great Commandment, what we need to hear is how that affects our relationships, how it affects our job, how it affects what we do at church and how we do things at church, how it affects the financial resources that I have in my hand. The reason I've titled this message, The Beginning of Stewardship, is because the beginning of stewardship, it begins with our relationship with God. Now, here's a definition of stewardship. Stewardship is faithfully managing the financial resources that God has entrusted to us. Now, I'll help you see how we get there, but that's the definition of stewardship. Stewardship is faithfully managing the financial resources that God has entrusted to us. So when Jesus is talking to the scribe in Mark chapter 12 and talking to us in that passage, as he is speaking to us today, he begins with the Shema. Now, the Shema is Hear, O Israel. Shema is the Hebrew term for hear. And the Shema was practiced in ancient Judaism. It was introduced in Deuteronomy when the children of Israel were moving from Egypt. They were out of Egypt, walking through the wilderness and making their way to the promised land. The Shema was given. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And as Jesus begins his teaching about the greatest of all commandments, he's saying it begins with this concept of God. It begins with this idea that everything belongs to God. Our Lord is one is a theological statement that talks about God himself is sovereign over all things. He directs all things. And he owns all things. Now, it reminds me of a story I've read. I read it many years ago, but was reminded of it this week as I was getting ready for the message. It's a story of, imagine you're at the grocery store and you're coming out. You've gone to the grocery store, you've gotten all your groceries, and you come out and you're making your way to the car. Well, that's what this woman was doing. She had gone to the grocery store. She had gotten her groceries, coming back and going to the car. And as she approaches her car, she sees that there are two men in her car. And so she panics a little bit. And she's read reports about how people try to steal stuff out of her car and how people can get injured. And so she decides she's going to do what she has been trained to do, and she reaches in her purse and she pulls out her concealed carry. She comes up behind the car, she points it, and she hollers into the car. Now, if this offends you, I'm sorry. It shouldn't. But she yells into the car. She says, "You're in my car? I'm out here, I've got a gun, now you get out right now." And the people in the car, the two guys, man, they jump out of the car and they scurry. I mean, they run off. They don't have an argument about it, they just bolt. The woman's kind of satisfied with herself. She puts her gun back in her purse and she loads her groceries into the car. She sits in the car. She pushes the button to start the car and it doesn't start. She wants to make sure she has her key fob with us. She reaches in and behind the pistol, she has her key fob. She has her key fob. She pushes the button again. Maybe she hadn't put foot on the brake enough. Puts foot on the brake, looks at the key fob, puts the key fob up next to the button, but it doesn't work. And so she's starting to panic. What did those guys do to my car? Why is it not working? And then she looks around and I thought the interior of my car was black. This is tan. It hits her. Y'all have already figured it out. It hits her. This isn't my car. And she looks around and sure enough, 2 or 3 spaces down is her car. Same make, same model. But the car she was in was not her car. She looked around for the guys that she had threatened with a pistol. They're gone. So she gets out of her car. She gets out of this car. She goes to her car, loads her groceries in her car, gets in her car, starts the car. It starts just fine. She backs up. She goes straight to the police department. And she goes into the police station, and she goes up to the counter and she says, I need to report a crime. And the sergeant at the desk says, well, what's the crime? And she said, I thought 2 guys were in my car, and I pulled a gun, and I told them to get out of the car, but it turns out it wasn't my car. It was somebody else's car. And the desk sergeant begins to laugh, and he points over to the side, and he said, those 2 guys just came in and said a 5'2" blonde woman had threatened them with a gun. You know, when it comes to money, we have a problem discerning who owns what. When Jesus gave the Shema and he talks about God, he's saying God owns everything. And that's not a new concept that Jesus came up with. In Psalm chapter 24, verse 1, the psalmist says, the world and everything in it belongs to the Lord, including you, including what's in your pocket. In Haggai chapter 2, verse 8, God says to the children of Israel, and he says to you and to me, he said, you know that gold and silver that you've got in your hand? He said, that belongs to me. You know, many times we have a problem about ownership. We think because we've got it in a bank account under our name that it belongs to us. Or we get a paycheck with our name on it that money belongs to us. But friends, the biblical principle is very simple. Everything belongs to God, including our money. Everything that you receive belongs to God. Do you realize every breath that you breathe belongs to God? And we've got to get this right. See, if we get this wrong, we're going to be like the person who decided to wash their hair with H2O2 instead of H2O. H2O2 is hydrogen peroxide. H2O is water. You wash your hair with water, everything's fine. You wash your hair with H2O2 and it ends up like mine. We've got to get this right. We have to understand that everything belongs to God. The money you got in your checking account, that's not yours, that's God's. And God has given us the privilege of being managers of that money. So when we look at, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, we are hearing this statement that everything belongs to the Lord. And our job is to faithfully manage those financial resources that He's put into our hands. So Jesus goes on, He says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Therefore you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. So here it sums up the law and prophets. Love God with everything that you are. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Now, love is more than just that sentimentality that we discover when we watch the Hallmark movies, especially the Christmas movies that have already come out that I can't bring myself to watch. I've seen them all anyway. But those that love, I love you kind of thing that you see in the Hallmark Christmas movies, which is a guy works at a Christmas tree farm that he owns. It's leveraged to the hilt. Some banker lady comes in from the big city, and she's come to evaluate the Christmas tree farm. She falls in love with Billy Bob, the owner of the Christmas tree farm, but they've got a conflict because she lives in the big city and he is a country boy. And even though country boys can survive, she's there to put the hatchet on the Christmas tree farm. But they love each other and they say, I love you. But Susie Q, she goes back to the big city because she can't give up her illustrious career, 6-figure salary, and she can't. She's lived her whole life to be in the corporate corporate world like she is, and she's there, and the first day back in the office after leaving Billy Bob on the Christmas tree farm, she's just miserable. So she sits there and she goes into the president's office. He offers her a raise and a promotion, and she says, "Thank you so much, I quit," and she leaves. And right as the Christmas tree lighting and the Christmas tree festival happens in the big city town, the small city town, she comes back and she makes her way back to the Christmas tree celebration, the Christmas tree lighting, and Billy Bob sees Susie Q walk up, and he asks the question, and they always ask the question, "What are you doing here?" Duh! I mean, you didn't figure it out. I figured it out before it even happened. He walks up and, "What are you doing here?" And she says, "I love you. I can't live without you." They know. And they kiss, and the Christmas tree is lit, and all is good. You could hear the angels singing, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with that kind of affection and that kind of sentimental love. That certainly our love for God includes that affection, that sentimentality, but when Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength," He's not talking merely about the sentiment of it. He's talking about the commitment behind it. To love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength means that we give Him all that we are. If you're a son or a daughter of God, He sent Jesus to die for your sin upon a cross so that you might be forgiven. So that, we sang it a few minutes ago, so that the shame of our sin, the weight of our shame, He gladly bore. Jesus took our shame, the sin that we had done, and He took it upon Himself, and He was killed on a cross to pay the price for our sin's guilt. And He was buried, He was raised from the dead to give us a new life, and we had our eyes open that we were sinners against a holy God, and we needed forgiveness of our sin, and so in that moment, good gracious, we were rescued by God's grace. And we were brought into His family when we put our trust in Jesus. Now, we were made sons and daughters of God, not because you went to church or because you did good things. You were made a son or a daughter of God because of what Jesus has done for you. And as a son or a daughter of God, now we live, listen, wholly and completely owned by God. We are all His. When we become sons and daughters of God, we go all in our commitment and our obedience to God. And so we love God with all that we are. We love God in our other relationships. Every relationship we have on this earth submits to our love for God. We love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Everything that we do at work submits to our love for God. When we go into the ballot box and we vote, we're voting first our love for God, not our love for our own personal pleasures. To love God means that we find out what He wants and we do it. That's what Jesus was talking about in John 14 and John 15. John 14 and 15, Jesus said, "Look, if you love me, you will obey my commandments." Here's how we love God. It's not by feeling certain feelings about God. That's certainly part of it. But we love God by committing ourselves to do what He wants. And friends, make no mistake, God speaks to us about faithfully managing the resources He's put in our care. Loving God means that we're going to be faithful in managing those resources. Everything belongs to God. Now, here's our part. We manage those resources, that money He's put in our account, we manage that in the way that He desires. That's stewardship. Stewardship is not managing those resources the way we desire. It's the way He desires. That's faithful stewardship. Again, you might say, well, you mean God's trying to tell me how to do my money? Well, yes, it's not your money, and yes, He's telling you what to do with it. Now, you might not have heard this enough, and if you haven't, I'm sorry, but this is what it means to be a son or a daughter of God. We live our lives in sync with God's will. Now, God's not a mean, bad kind of dictator in terms of he's going to make it hard on you. No, He's not. He's the loving Father. You go to the end of Matthew chapter 6. He's going to take care of you. He takes care of what you eat and where you sleep and what you wear. He's going to take care of you. He is a loving Father. If you're hungry, He's going to give you bread. He's not going to give you a stone. He's going to give you fish. He's not going to give you a snake to eat. He's going to take care of you in a way that a perfect loving Father will. But we need to understand ownership. All the resources, all the financial resources that I have in my bank account or my RRA or on my credit card, all those resources belong to God. And He's saying, I want you to love me in such a way that you do with those resources what I want. And that's what a good manager does. You have a bunch of money, you go to a financial manager or financial planner, you give him that money or her that money, and you say, now I want you to do A, B, and C with that money. Mostly, it's about making it more. That's why you go to them. And certainly protecting you. I want you to take that money. I want a 4% ROI on this $10,000 I've given you. And so they will work to get that 4% ROI. That's what they do. That's a manager of money, of your money. That money, right? Well, God has made you a financial manager of His resources. And everything belongs to Him. And He's just saying, now I want you to do with the money that I put in your care, I want you to handle that money the way I tell you to. Okay? And that applies to every single person here who is a follower of Jesus Christ. None of us are immune to that. And so here we are. We're all right. I'm a son of God. I'm a follower of Christ. I'm a daughter of God. I want to do that very thing. I want to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. So how do I do that? How can I be faithful? Well, that's what I want to do as we close out today. I just want us to look. Now, next week, we're going to be a little bit more specific. But today I just want to kind of lay out for you this simple principle of what it means to be faithful in the financial stewardship. And by the way, I don't know how many of y'all know this, but there's this little app called Venmo. Y'all know Venmo? For those of you who don't, like me, I don't do Venmo, but they tell me that Venmo is like, say you bought me a Reese peanut butter cup, and so I'm going to pay you for that Reese peanut butter cup that you bought for me, and I'm going to say, do you have a Venmo? I guess this is how it works. And you say, yes, I've got a Venmo, and so I Venmo you that $5 for that Reese peanut butter cup because it was at a premium because I was hungry and I needed some for my ice cream. So I Venmo you. Now, here's what I heard my wife talking to one of our family members about. She said to him, now you need to understand that if your Venmo is not on private, that anybody can see how you're spending your money. So so some of y'all better watch out because I know when you're at the ABC liquor store. That's all I'm saying. Oh, I'm watching. I'm just kidding. I don't do Venmo. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you don't put it on private, everybody can see. Well, it doesn't matter if you're Venmo or not. If you're cash and carry, it doesn't matter. God sees everything that you're spending. He understands it. He understands every decision you're making with the money He's put into your care. He understands every part of it. And so we want to be faithful, and we're not going to get away with being unfaithful because He already sees it. So what do? How can we be faithful? Well, the first principle I want us to look at in faithfully loving God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, which means I'm going to manage the money the way He desires. First step in that is the principle of priority. We need to give as a priority. Turn in your copy of Scripture to Proverbs chapter 3. Great passage with a great promise. I love this passage. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9 and 10. Just listen to the command that God gives. Now, we want to be obedient to God's commands, right? Because that's what it means to love Him. If I'm going to love Him, I want to obey Him. So here's what it looks like. Proverbs 3, verse 9. Honor the Lord with all your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. That's the command. So honor the Lord with your possessions and with all the first fruits of your increase. Now, what that means is you do what God wants you to do with that money. A first fruit is a principle throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. First fruit, it's a farming term. So back then, the way you bartered money or the way you got stuff is you gave grain or a cow or a sheep. And so when they would come to the church or the temple or the synagogue, they would bring the first fruit. So they had a field of wheat, and the first fruit of that harvest, they would collect, they would put it aside and say, that is for the Lord. The very first thing they did, they would take the harvest, they would put it aside and say, that's for the Lord. Or they have a cow and the first calf that was born, they would take it and put it aside and say, that's for the Lord. Or the first sheep that's born, the little lamb, that belongs to the Lord. And that is how they honored the Lord with all their possessions. The very first thing they did was set it aside for the Lord. The reason we get together every week, one of the reasons we talk about giving our tithes and our resources to the Lord is because that's the New Testament way of doing it. We get together at the first of every week and we give the first fruits. We give as a priority. Now, it's not just about chronology. You don't have to give the first of the week or anything like that. I encourage you to do it, but here's what you must do. You must prioritize in your heart that when you get a paycheck, that there is money that belongs to the Lord, and it's not to be touched. And regardless, when you give it, that's what you've got to do. You prioritize that. When I was a kid, I had a paper route, and I was taught and trained by my parents to give like this. And on that paper route, I would throw the papers, and then I'd go collect the money. And you had to go to door and collect the money, and they would give you cash for the paper, and then I'd have to pay the paper, whatever they charged me, and whatever I had left over, that was my profit, that was for me. And so I'd make $200, $300, $400 a month on my paper route. And so say I made $450 this month on my paper route, and I would sit there with a wad of cash, and they paid by cash. And so I had all this cash in my room, and I would sit there, and the way I was taught by my parents in terms of being faithful in managing those resources, I'd take that $450, and right off the top, I'd take $45, and I'd put it aside and say, that belongs to the Lord. All this other stuff, man, I can go buy a TV with it. I can go buy a shotgun with it. I can go watch a movie with it. I can go to the corner store and get my Marvel comic with it. I did all those things. But that was my money. That was the money that I could use on me. But the $45, that was to the Lord. Because that was how I was taught. You give 10% of your profit to the Lord. Right? There have been times when I've been tested on that. Even as a 6th, 7th, 8th grader, I made good money, and I mean that's good money. $450 a month. That's good money for an 8th grader. Nobody would date me, so I didn't have any dates or anything like that. That did not get a laugh. Y'all are like, yeah, I understand why. So I'd take that $450, but suppose my brother and I hatched a plan that we were going to make a big purchase, and we were going to go in together and make a big purchase, this wonderful, wonderful purchase that we were going to have a TV with a remote control. No. And we knew that it was going to be more than what we had here. There was always a test that I keep that $45 just this once. Right? And as I thought it would get easier as we got older, and Edie and I, we've had those tests in our life and in our marriage, and oh man, that's tough, right? And give the first fruit. But because we made it a priority, we didn't have to wonder what was expected of us. Now, it doesn't mean I was always obedient to it. But that was the expectation. I knew how to show God the love that I have for Him, and that was being obedient in the principle of priority, and make giving a priority. The second principle I want you to see, we give as a priority, but also we give generously. Now, this is from one place. Next week we'll look at generous giving. But can I tell you, here's, as you turn in there, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, here's what I hear most of all when it comes, and I've said it myself, well, I don't make enough to give. Have you ever thought that? Well, I just don't have enough cushion to give. If you knew all my expenses, I just don't have enough money to give. And I get that. I do. I understand that. I have compassion. I've been there. I've walked that path. But giving is not tied to what you have. Giving is tied to whom you belong. When we tie our giving to what we have, we'll never have enough to give. Because we've messed up the principle of ownership, we think that's our money. But when we tie our giving to whom we belong to God, and God is going to take care of us. And even though it looks like the margin is slim, God is going to be gracious to help us give what He's calling us to give. God's not going to ask you to give in such a way that you don't have bread for your table or a bed in which to lie. God's going to take care of you. Our giving is not tied to what we have. Our giving is tied to whom we belong. So we give as a priority, and secondly, we give generously. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Paul's writing to the church at Corinth, trying to convince them to give. And as he's trying to convince them to give, he paints the picture of a church in Macedonia. Here's what he says. Moreover, brethren, we make known to you the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia. And here's their setting. All right, so here's where they were. In great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. And just stop there. Here's what he's saying. It's a lot of words, a bunch of flowery words that Paul uses there. He's saying they were dirt poor, and yet they were generous in giving. You and I need to understand the principle of generosity. Remember Proverbs 3, 9, and 10. I just talked about verse 9. Honor the Lord with all your possessions. First fruit of all your, the first fruit of all your harvest or whatever. Verse 10 says, when we are faithful to be obedient, here's what God does. Proverbs 3:10. And your barns will be overflowing with abundance. See, God gives us the promise that goes along with the command. He said, look, you can be generous because I'm going to be generous with you. You can be generous. Now, next week we'll look at the principle of generosity in a little widow woman giving just a little penny. And Jesus said that is generous. Again, our giving is not tied to what we have. Our giving is tied to whom we belong. After all, it's all His money anyway. I'm going to be generous with His money. Because that's how He's been with us. He's been generous with us. When you realize the generosity of His grace in rescuing you from sin's guilt, then it should awaken in your heart generosity in response. The principle of priority and the principle of generosity, then the third principle is the principle of purpose, or we must give purposefully. Go down a few verses, 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Look at verse 6 and 7. But this I say, again, he's talking about the promise. Here's the promise. He who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. He who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Verse 7, so let each of you give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly, nor of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. And just go ahead and look at verse 8. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, that you always, having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. All right. Again, I'd love to preach a message on that, but I'm not going to. Giving purposefully means that we understand that when I sow sparingly, I reap sparingly. That's the way God works. When I sow generously, I will reap generously. And so as I look at that equation for giving, God says, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to give faithfully and cheerfully. Not because the preacher said it, but because God has shown you what He desires for you to do. And be obedient in it. Being purposeful means that I hear from God as I read in His Word, and I am obedient to the Spirit of God showing me how to give. And when we are purposeful, the key component there is obedience. When we're generous, the key component there is obedience. When we set it as a priority, the key component is obedience. Some of y'all are going to say, well, I can't believe the preacher talked about money today. When that's the wrong question. The question you and I need to ask is simply this. Am I loving God in the resources that He's put into my care? Am I faithfully managing the money He's put in my hand in the way He desires? The real question is, am I being obedient to God when it comes to my money? We're going to have an All Give Sunday. We did this last year. We're going to do it again. Really, All Give, and that's going to be on November the 17th. The reason we're doing an All Give Sunday is we want those of you who have not yet started that journey of giving to begin. And this is a great day and a great way for you to begin. Now, All Give Sunday is at the close of that worship gathering. We're going to have everybody stand up, and you're going to come and you're going to put your tithe and your offering as the Lord has purposed with you for you to give. And you're going to give that. And you might say, well, I'll do my stuff online. We're going to have a little card for you to use and to give it that way. But we're not trying to make a show. We're trying to be united in worship and demonstrate that through our giving. And my challenge to you, we don't set a financial goal. It's not about the money. I know you might not believe this. It's really not. It's not about the money. It's about growing as a follower of Jesus and being obedient. That's our goal. We want you to be obedient. Me to be obedient in this one simple thing of stewardship. There's a little boy, 8, 9 years old, and he was going to meet his dad. His dad owned a five and dime downtown, a county seat town, and he was going to go down to see his dad after school. He was on his way, rode his bike, parked his bike, and right outside the store, toward on the windowsill of the store, he saw a cigar that had been lit and left. And that little kid, he said, I've seen grown men smoking cigars, and I just want to see what that's like. So he takes the cigar, and he does what any little kid's going to do if he's trying to smoke a cigar as a 10-year-old. He's going to go sneak. And so he goes around to the side of the building in the alleyway, and he starts puffing on that cigar. About that same time, his dad comes out of the store. And he calls his son's name, and that boy, he takes that smoldering cigar. He can't chunk it because he knows his dad would see it, so he tries to hide it behind his back. His dad walks up and says, "Hey, son, what are you doing?" Now, the reason I'm a dad, I know that dad knew what that boy was doing already. But he asked him, "Son, what are you doing?" And about this time, the kid is freaking out. He's sick from the smoke already, but now he's really freaking out because he knows he's toast. And he looks across the street and he sees this billboard announcing a circus that's in town. And so he has the bright idea, and all this is happening in milliseconds. And he has the bright idea, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to deflect and distract my dad with the circus. So here's what he says. He says, Dad, the circus is in town. Can we go? And the dad crouches over to his son and he says, Boy, don't ever ask for something while you have smoldering disobedience behind your back. Some of us are asking God for things while we're being rebellious against Him. We have chaos in our lives and a lack of contentment in our possessions because we're just being disobedient. And today I beg you, join me in a recommitment to love God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our might, and with all our strength. Let's love God by managing the money He puts in our care in the way He desires. Let's be obedient. Would you pray with me? Father, thank you so much for your word, and I pray, oh God, that you would encourage our hearts to celebrate you with a heart of obedience, to love you as you've called us to love you in obedience. Father, I pray for each one of us who are trying to figure out this message and how it applies to our lives. And so, God, right now, I pray that you would just work in the hearts of your sons and daughters and give them the faith that they need to trust you and to understand that faithful stewardship is not tied to what we have as much as it is tied to whom we belong. So help for us to live as your sons and daughters, faithfully following after you, and challenge us to greater obedience. Now be glorified as we worship you and as we set our gaze upon Jesus, who has brought us into your family through faith in Christ. And it's in His name we pray.